Shalom, saints. I pray Abba Yahuwah has been blessing you and prospering your souls. Today, I'd like to continue our studies looking at spiritual warfare from the Book of Ruth. But first, a brief word of prayer. Abba Yahuwah, we desire that you would receive all the praise, glory, and honor from our lives. Open the eyes of our understanding that we might see as you see. In Yahusha's holy name, so be it. Last week, we looked together at the life of the patriarch Elimelech. Together, we saw how his fear drove him into the land of his enemies. Fear, the refusal to trust the Most High, drove Elimelech to make bad decisions. In the wake of that fateful, fear-driven decision made to preserve his family's lives physically, something terrible happened. Not only did Elimelech lose his own life, but he also lost the lives of his two sons. The death of all the men of the house of Elimelech showed that Elimelech's whole line would be extinguished. The one man's sin cut him off from the land of the living and the opportunity to serve the Father in spirit and in truth. This is what sin does. It destroys. Fear will ruin us, rob us of our promise, and prevent us from fulfilling our Elohim-appointed destiny. But you see, this is where things get interesting. We can turn to the Apostle Paul to introduce the next phase of the life of the house of Elimelech. Look with me at Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 through 6. But Yahuwah, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Mashiach. By grace ye are saved, and hath raised us up together, and made us sit together in heavenly places, in Mashiach Yahusha. Paul begins the second chapter of Ephesians by telling his believing Israelite readers that at one point they were dead in their sins and trespasses. At one point, every believer once walked according to the course of this world and obeyed the dictates of the prince of the power of the air. You don't even have to know that you're serving Satan to serve him. In fact, he often prefers to deceive you, to have you fooled into thinking that you are serving the Most High when you're actually serving the devil. But despite that being our beginning, walking according to the course of this world, and death being our portion, as death was Elimelech's portion, someone who is higher than us can intervene. Paul exclaimed it. But Yah, he said. Everything was looking bad in their lives. Everything may be looking bad in your life. You may have been caught up in drugs or prostitution or alcoholism or the loss of everything that you hold dear, everything that you love. But Yah, when the day seems the darkest, there can always be a but Yah. And beloved, that's where we find ourselves here in this story of the Book of Ruth. Elimelech's fear-driven decisions killed all the men who held the promise of executing Yah's will in their lives and in their generation. But Yah. Look at Ruth chapter 1, and let's start at the 6th verse. There we see Naomi, Elimelech's widow, living with two Moabite daughters-in-law, the wives of his dead sons. Naomi had a choice to make. Was she going to stay in that land where she had lost almost everything precious to her, her husband and her sons? Or was she going to see about finding life in the place the Father had prepared for her people, the house of her fathers? Let's see what she chose. Ruth chapter 1, verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that Yahuwah had visited his people in giving them bread. Naomi decided to undo the mistake that Elimelech had made. Now that she's no longer tied to the leadership of a man too afraid to walk humbly with Yahuwah, now she has a power to make the decisions, and she decides that she is going to pursue the Father's will. She doesn't have to agree with Elimelech anymore. She doesn't have to obey Elimelech anymore. Despite her pain at her earthly loss, she has now found spiritual freedom, the freedom to obey Yahuwah and find bread, the bread of life, by returning to the place the Father gave to her people instead of living among the heathen. But she also has two daughters-in-law now, children of the Moabites. And what will she do with them? Let's see. Ruth chapter 1, verses 7 through 9. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Yehudah. And Naomi said unto her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. Yahuwah deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead, and with me. Yahuwah grant you that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. What did Naomi do? She blessed her daughters-in-law and asked them to return to the houses from which they had come. She knew she was too old to have sons who could grow up in time to marry her daughters-in-law. She was being loving and kind here. She was giving these young women the opportunity to have families of their own and not be stuck with her. There were two daughters-in-law. The first was named Orpah. This is a name that Oprah Winfrey's parents were going for when they named Oprah. They just inverted the R and the P. Instead of Orpah, they spelt it Oprah. The name Orpah means gazelle, a lovely deer, someone who can move fast. What do we know about Orpah? What does she do here? Well, Orpah made a short pretense of staying with her mother-in-law and being loyal to her, but she quickly returned to her family of origin and to the gods of the Moabites, to Chemosh and the other demonic beings whom the people of Moab served. But the second daughter-in-law of Naomi is where we get the name of this book. Her name is Ruth. Orpah meant gazelle, a lovely and fast deer. But Ruth's name meant friendship. Ruth had a loyalty to her mother-in-law that her sister-in-law lacked. Ruth tried to stay where Orpah left. Orpah was probably beautiful, but not loyal. Once the family meal ticket was gone, she left to see what she could find amongst her fellow heathen. This goes to show that a lot of the time, the folks who look good on the outside are not the ones who are going to stick with you for the long term. Orpah was shallow and was not a true servant of the Elohim of the Israelites. Let's look at Ruth chapter 1 as the story continues, verses 14 through 15. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. You see, Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, and what the scripture is meaning here is that she kissed her goodbye. She was out. The family meal ticket, her husband was gone. She's out. She was only here for the good times, and now she's gone. But Ruth was built different. Ruth loved fiercely. Despite mourning her husband, she loved Naomi, her mother-in-law. And not only that, she found a true heavenly Father in Yahuwah. and had decided to abandon Chemosh and the gods of the Moabites. She left her father's gods in order to follow and serve Yahuwah Elohim. Ruth 1:16-17 tells us this. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy Elohim my Elohim. Where thou diest, will I die, and there will I be buried. Yahuwah do so to me, and more also, if aught, if anything but death part thee and me. Do you know what we're reading here, guys? This sounds like marital vows, a covenant set of vows. Ruth entered into an eternal covenant to walk with her mother-in-law forever, to walk with the children of Yasharel forever, and to follow Yahuwah Elohim forever, as completely as every fiber in her being would allow. Ruth insisted this, even though Naomi tried to get Ruth to turn away, just as Orpah, her sister-in-law, had turned away. What I see here is a beautiful portrait. This is what real faith and real friendship actually look like. You see, Ruth wasn't like a lot of our so-called friends today, listening to people attack us and willing to just roll along with it and be silent. Going along with people who they know hate us, but also pretending that they're our friends, when secretly there's something in them that hates us too. Ruth rode hard for Naomi, her mother-in-law. You couldn't say anything to Ruth about Naomi because Ruth would have been ready to fight. Ruth loved Naomi and put her money where her mouth was. She showed her love. She didn't just say that she loved Naomi with her lips. She showed that she loved Naomi with her life. She picked up and followed the woman and moved to a whole new country. Ruth actually followed Naomi, and she followed Naomi's Elohim because Naomi's Elohim had become Ruth's Elohim. May Abba Yahuwah grant you friends like this in this life, someone who will love you for you and who will follow the Most High Yahuwah with you and not just pretend that they follow the Most High. You see, sometimes we yoke ourselves to people like Orpah, who actively oppose our life purpose to serve our Heavenly Father. But what we need in our lives are a few more Ruths and fewer Orpahs. Orpahs are everywhere. They're a dime a dozen. But Ruths come along sometimes just once in a lifetime. They're rare. They're precious. And when Abba gives you a friend like that, you better pray for that man. You better pray for that woman, that person who's loyal to you despite no matter what, who loves you and loves your soul and wants to serve the Most High with you and wants to see you be everything that the Most High wants you to be. That's who Ruth was. And that's who I pray Abba gives each and every one of us who love and serve him into our own lives. It's a powerful lesson there in friendship. But we see another lesson here that's worth looking at also, and that's this. Ruth began to follow the Most High Yahuwah, the God of the Israelites. And the way she did it was by cleaving to Naomi, to Elimelech's house. In other words, Ruth, the heathen woman, clave to the house of Yehudah. She joined herself to them. She stuck by them in their good times, and she stuck by them in their bad times. What are we seeing here? This, brothers and sisters, is the biblical example, the biblical portrait of how non-bloodline Israelites, how Gentiles actually join themselves to the covenant of the Most High. It's not the stuff that the pop preachers are talking about. This is how Gentiles actually join the true Hebrews and hang with us to the end. Ruth, you see, moved with humility. She didn't know what her end would be in leaving her father's house and her people, but she knew that she had to follow Yahuwah and Yahuwah's children whithersoever they went. Yahuwah filled Ruth's mind, and she wanted to please him more than anything. She wanted to be around Yahuwah's people more than anything in the world. What does this sound like? Well, it sounds to me like the 144,000 of Revelation 7 and Revelation 14. Let's look at how Revelation 14 describes those whom the Father chooses. Revelation 14, verse 1 reads, "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts, and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto Yahuwah and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of Yahuwah." We could spend hours on this passage, but let's look at just a few highlights here. First, the 144,000 stand with the Lamb of Yahuwah, Yahusha HaMashiach, in Mount Zion. What was Ruth doing in her covenant with Naomi? She was standing with the Most High and standing on Mount Zion. What consumed Ruth's mind? The Most High Yahuwah, the God of Israel. She wasn't focused on serving Chemosh, the God of her people. She wanted to serve Yahuwah alone. In other words, Yahuwah's name, his reputation, was on Ruth's forehead. She thought about Yahuwah. Yahuwah filled her mind, just as Yahuwah fills the minds of the 144,000. Verse 3 of Revelation 14 tells us that the 144,000 sing a new song, a song that no one else knows but them. Why is that? Because the 144,000 go through trials that no one else goes through. They are pressed beyond measure. They go through their own Gethsemane. They go through horrors that others can't even imagine. They go through the loss of spouses. They go through sexual assaults. They go through false accusations. They go through persecutions of all kinds. They go through betrayals of the most horrific kinds. Their family members betray them. Their friends betray them. Their employers may hate them. Their family members may actually sell them. They have lived a life where Satan has buffeted them and tried to destroy them and get them to break, just as the devil tried to destroy Job. They may suffer homelessness, drug addiction, terminal illness, or near terminal illness. But despite these troubles, they keep giving Yah the glory. They keep holding on to Yahuwah's unchanging hand. They don't blaspheme. They don't follow other gods. Instead, they remain faithful to Yahuwah through it all. And this was what Ruth did. She lost her husband, her father-in-law, and the promise of even having a home. But she kept praising Yahuwah. She had a new song. This is what Isaiah 65 is talking about in verse 14. Check it out. "Behold, my servant shall sing for joy of heart, but ye shall cry for sorrow of heart, and shall howl for vexation of spirit." The servants of the Most High sing for joy, but the wicked cry for sorrow of heart and howl for vexation of spirit. Those who reject Yahuwah in this life in order to get the pleasures of the world, or because they are fearful to follow him like Elimelech, will one day wail with weeping and gnashing of teeth, vexation of spirit and sorrow of heart. The 144,000 are also not defiled with women. The original word here is not women from the standpoint of just physical flesh and blood women. It is woman, the state of womanhood or womanliness, or if you like, as the Bible describes it elsewhere in the book of Revelation, the whore. The other gods, the gods whom the nations served, the gods whom the Moabites served, were what the scriptures collectively call the whore, who refuses to follow Yahuwah and his ways. Abba calls these gods the whore of Babylon, the false religious system of mystery Babylon. When Ruth made the permanent commitment to follow Yahuwah, even though she had grown up with Chemosh, she was willing and she did leave the whore, the woman, forever. She was refusing to be defiled by the woman who opposed the Most High. It didn't matter to her that she had once served this woman. She didn't want to be bothered with it anymore. She didn't want to be defiled by it anymore. She left behind all of her old religious ways in order that she might follow Yahuwah alone. And what else do the 144,000 do? They follow the Lamb, Yahusha the Messiah, wherever he goes. And we've already seen in Ruth's great declaration and song in Ruth 1:16 through 17 that Ruth had decided to do just that and followed through with it, as we see in the rest of the book of Ruth. And not only this, but the 144,000 spoke no lies. There was no guile in their mouths. They weren't false teachers and liars like, say, that prophetess Celestial, or T.D. Jakes, or Donald Trump, or Kamala Harris, or Joe Biden. The 144,000 only spoke truth. And Ruth was like this also. She was a truth teller. She only spoke truth. The picture that we have here of Ruth, brothers and sisters, is of a woman, a Gentile, who gives all that she has to the Israelites, to Mount Zion, and to the God of the Israelites, Yahuwah Elohim. In other words, the things that the 144,000 did, Ruth did the same things. Look at Revelation 7, verse 4. It tells us that the 144,000 were those who were sealed from among the children of the 12 tribes of Yasharel. They were bloodline. They were the blood-washed, blood-bought remnant who held on to Yahuwah through every trial and tribulation as they were scattered among the nations. Ruth was devout, set apart to the Father. From amongst the nations, Ruth was grafted in to the house of Yasharel. However, most Gentiles fall into a second category that's not the 144,000 of Yasharel, but the second category described in Revelation 7. That's described in Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 10. Let's look at those verses. They read, "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our Elohim, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb." There will indeed be many Gentiles delivered from their sins and into the blessings and benefits of the covenant with Yahuwah. Yahuwah will indeed be these Gentiles' Elohim, but they won't be part of the 144,000. They won't be sealed with the same timing as the 144,000 in the first verses of Revelation 7. However, they will receive that same glorious honor that the believing remnant of the house of Israel will receive. In this respect, they will be known as the servants of the Most High, and they'll be delivered. Some of our Hebrew brothers and sisters don't like this truth, and I get it, given how cruelly the Gentiles have oppressed us. But this is what Scripture teaches. It doesn't teach that all Gentiles, it doesn't even teach that most Gentiles will make it into the kingdom. But those who actually serve the Most High and who cleave to Yasharel in the way that Ruth cleaved to Yasharel and served the Most High, yeah, those folks are going to make it. And they will sanctify themselves to the Father, and they will receive white robes of the righteousness of the Mashiach Yahusha. He will accept their offering to be living sacrifices. This is what Isaiah 66 verse 10 is trying to teach us. Look at it. Isaiah 66 verse 10 reads as follows. Rejoice ye with Yerushalayim, and be glad with her, all ye that love her. Rejoice for joy with her, all ye that mourn for her. The Most High is commanding those who are friends to Yasharel to rejoice with Yerushalayim, or in other words, with true Yasharel. He commands these Gentiles to be glad for us and with us on the day we come into the kingdom where Yahusha rules, and we rule under him as his rod of iron, as his rod of iron, as his battle axe and weapons of war. These Gentiles to whom the Most High is speaking in Isaiah 66 verse 10 love Israel. They don't love the fake Revelation 2:9 people in the modern state of Israel, the descendants of the Khazars, who are the fake Jews. But this group of Gentiles are like Ruth. They love the true Israelites, and they cleave to the true Israelites, and they rejoice with the true Israelites when they see her blessed, and they mourn when they see true Israel oppressed. This is so opposite of the way the world is right now. The whole world right now is part of the Psalm 83 conspiracy against us, true Yasharel. This is why they do not care when we are gunned down in the streets or discriminated against in every area of life. Not only do most Gentiles not care, they actively participate in our oppression. They set up grocery stores and liquor stores and gas stations and beauty supply stores in our communities, and they make enormous profits off of us, and they don't care one thing about our oppression or about our communities. They don't lose any sleep to see us mistreated. They, what the Father calls, further the affliction, and they're happy to do it. So let's be clear, most Gentiles won't make it into the kingdom because they hate true Israel. But there are a few in every generation who will make it. And when you add up the few in this generation, with the few in that generation, with the few in another generation, over the course of the 4,000 years of history since Yahuwah walked with Abraham, well, when you add all of those numbers up, you're going to get what Abba promised in Revelation 7:9, a great multitude, which no man can number. If you are a Gentile under the sound of my voice, you would be wise to seek the Most High and pray to be found worthy to stand before the Son of Man. Pray that you be found like Ruth. Do what Ruth did in order to get what Ruth got. And if you're an Israelite, may you be found faithful to stand before the Son of Man. May you follow Yahusha wherever he goes. May you not be defiled with the ungodliness of the fallen angels and their false religions. May you be free from lying and deceit and immorality. And may you be sealed in your forehead with a steadfast love to the Father and to the Lamb. This is what Naomi saw in Ruth. Look at Ruth 1:18. This is how we'll end. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. Naomi saw that there was just no changing Ruth's mind. Ruth had pledged herself to the Most High and to Naomi. the representative of the house of Yasharel, and there was no going back. Naomi saw it, and she stopped trying to persuade her. She said, well, if Ruth's going to come with me, let's go. Let's get up out of here. Let's go. I pray, brothers and sisters, that you are steadfastly minded to follow Yahusha, the Lamb of Yah, whithersoever he goes. In Yahusha's holy name, so be it. Peace to the Yasharel of Elohim. Be blessed, saints.